Hello. Hey, world. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 2 of South of Hollywood. Today, I have a very special co host, one of my best friends, and I call her my star twin, LaShonda.
Hi guys.
So, LaShonda, give us a shout out. Tell us where you're at right now.
I am in New Jersey. It's
And tell us a little about yourself. Come on, tell us who you are.
Yeah, so I'm in New Jersey. I am a freelance compositor, so I work on movies and TV shows, visual effects, and yeah, I'm working remotely lately, so that's pretty cool. And that's about it. I'm a mom. I have one child.
That's awesome. So let's just jump right in. I know you say you're a VFX artist who doesn't watch TV or, movies.
So
But what are some things you guys are watching at home, or what are you looking forward to watching?
yeah, it's so random because I work on movies and TV shows and people are like, "Oh, like yeah, I watched that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't. Like I don't know what that's about." But because of the pandemic, I actually watched every show that I worked on last year and like I watched a whole bunch of movies too, like stuff that I probably normally wouldn't watch. I think actually for the first time in my entire life, I watched the whole Star Wars series.
Oh my
Like
gosh, yeah.
and it's crazy because at work, everyone's so heavy into Star Wars because that was like the
Mhm.
beginning of VFX. Like everyone can always lean to that. Like, wow, they just like for the time, that was like a lot
Yeah.
of cool stuff. And I had never watched it. And then I was like, oh, I'll watch it. And now I'm kind of watching a little bit more TV these days.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I was happy to watch Black Widow that just came out.
Mhm.
Um, the company that I work for now, they worked on The Mandalorian
Mhm.
and they actually worked on Black Widow, so I was cool. It was cool to see that. Dooms they worked on,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
yeah. Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings they worked
And
on.
those are all movies I haven't seen because I don't have. Well, Dune, I do have the subscription, but I just haven't watched it yet because I haven't had the patience. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I watched them all on Disney Plus.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I still haven't went to the actual movies, and I kind of refuse to go.
I
And
just went to the movies for the first time.
oh
Yes.
wow,
To
yeah.
see Eternals.
Oh yeah, they worked. My company worked on Eternal, so it's like all the time that these movies are being released, my coworkers are like, "Oh, this is being released. This is being released." Like, and they're like, "Oh, I worked on it. I got credits," and I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'll watch it." If anything, I'm watching them more to see like the visual effects done on the movies because
Mhm.
actually in visual effects, the capabilities are changing. They're incorporating a lot more artificial intelligence stuff, more real time editing capabilities. So a lot of the newer stuff coming out is having that stuff included in the production pipeline workflow. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like they could do that. Like I think I watched the trailer for Ghostbusters,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, they got some cool effects in there. Unfortunately, it's only released in the movie theater, and I'm like,
I
okay,
know.
I guess
That's
I'll
why I
wait.
went to see Eternals. But I feel like that's just always a marketing gimmick because for 1,000 years they would say like only in movie theaters. And then literally 5 months later it would be on demand. So I feel
Yeah,
like it's still a marketing ploy, but I did want to see Eternals on the big screen for the special effects.
yeah,
And it was amazing. It was I think the director was Chloe Zhao or Chloe Zhou. She did an amazing job really trying to incorporate the use of technology in the film. So
yeah,
it's like all of that of course is animated CGI, but it is such a like futuristic, perspective. Like I'm like, oh, I
girl.
can't wait till when we can actually do these things in real life. Like
And we're easing into that actually. Like all these things that they're able to like imagine for these movies and stuff. It's like, oh, it's like slowly creeping into actual life. Like,
absolutely.
so yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, I definitely am into special effects and fantasy right now because I just feel like real life is it was enough. So, like we had that verdict come down on Friday from Kenosha, where this kid that crossed state lines with a gun and killed people got off, using self-defense. So for some reason I was like, you know what? I need to see a movie where the good guys win, because
Right.
real life is not doing it right now.
Yeah. Soon we'll all need to escape from the realities of I
Definitely.
mean, the pandemic was the start, and then like once everything opens up, people are just like acting crazy. And that as a prime example, like you just out in the street with a gun, shooting up like what's that video game?
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto. Yeah.
And like y'all just shooting up, and then it's like, oh, self-defense. Well, I mean, did you really need to be outside with a gun?
That's the part where I'm like,
I
see,
could
that's
see
like
if you were at home in your car.
own house. That's the part
Like
where I'm
we
tripping.
just
I'm
walk
like,
in the streets with a gun, and whenever we feel a threat, it's automatically self-defense.
defense.
Like, but you weren't doing anything like on a regular life sort of thing. Like
Yeah,
you were
exactly.
out there probably looking for something to shoot.
To
Like
shoot. That's literally what you were doing with a gun. I mean, with a rifle at that. You was outright. And I cannot get over. Imagine a black man just walking down the street with a big ass
first
rifle.
of all, the guy in Walmart with a BB gun in the gun section still get shot in the store.
By a cop and killed. Literally. Shot and
In the
killed.
store, in the gun section, holding
Purchasing.
like, how does that equate to, oh, he was the threat, but these people literally walking out in the streets with guns in tow. Yes, and let us see some black people march. If anybody in the Black Lives Matter march
Start walking around with
a gun,
rifles.
then it would have been a completely different sort of situation.
Completely different. So, not to get sidetracked, because that's definitely one of the hot topics out here in the world,
Yeah.
it's definitely like, yeah. So I'm definitely escaping into film and fantasy. And I do think it's interesting though that I feel like there was a lot of fantasy that's come out between 2020 and 2021. And maybe they just felt like it was the right time to release some of these. Because
Like
like you said,
everyone was just being extra creative.
yeah.
Like, and it's actually funny because where I work now, this is actually my first time working for a company where they kind of do like pre-production. Like you got the script and then this is the story, but how do we even make this story come to life? Like this is my first time having this sort of insight. And it's pretty cool because like we'll just be having movies and people will literally be like, oh wait, this will be cool or that would be cool. And it's like nothing's really fully thought out yet. Like it's all coming together. And it really is just based off of people's imagination. Like, and they'll reshoot and they'll like restart like anything. If someone's like, wait, no, this whole section needs to be rewritten, like after it was done already. Like after sleeping on it, they're like, wait. So it's like a lot of imagination, thought, and time. Like they give people time to develop new, like creative ways to interpret the story or maybe just change the story completely. Or like if something's probably going on in the world that can be incorporated, it's like, wait, we can kind of add this, So I'm usually in post production where it's literally like,
It's
going
done.
screen.
Yeah.
We just need to fine tune this and we putting it out. So it's really exciting just to be a part of this, like the real storyline part of movies. Cause I'm like, oh, maybe one day I could be a director, like taking this in enough, like, cause I've never had experience. I didn't know this was how things were done from the beginning points.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're going to come back to how you got started too. So but you bring up a really good point about some of the trends in Hollywood that I want to ask you about too. So there was a lot of creativity, a lot of people pushing out projects that they were, working on, but they just wanted to get them out, during this time. What do you think about, this kind of pushing Hollywood to revive old series and old movies? So you mentioned like Dune, the idea of Dune is it's a remake from 89 or 84, something like that. And, even Disney kind of getting all these series out, to complement the movies they've already made, right? And even the thing with Eternals, even though Eternals is a new story, it's this revival of a really old comic, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about Hollywood? I mean, they're being creative, but at the same time, they're recycling a lot of media story ideas. What do you think about that?
Well, it's also like you're also bringing those things into the century, right? Like you're like, wow, this was a really good storyline. How can we like make it visually like amazing?
Yeah.
Like, so it's pretty cool because, and if you think about it, I mean, some movies, like I think me and Izzy just watched 101 Dalmatians, like, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
I saw that.
and she didn't want to watch it at first, and I was like, well, I watched it when I was a kid. Like, I actually wanted to see like what they did with it, and she was like, okay. So you can kind of share some things with your kids that you watched or enjoyed as a kid, but also to see it like more visually and enhanced, different effects and stuff like that. It's a lot more visually pleasing. Like back when TVs first came out, I mean, they had black and white at first, so it was kind of like they were just literally putting stuff on. Like they were, like no extras could be done. So like watching stuff. I think when I watched WandaVision.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like trying to be, kind of like being the Ricardos, I guess they were trying to like do that. And it was like, but it was like all superhero and like VFX. Yeah. And I was like, wow, like tying those two things together was like so cool.
Yeah.
And normally I probably wouldn't have watched that either. But my company worked on it again. So I was like, oh, let me watch it. And I was like, wow, I like the combination of like taking that old style thing. And they kind of they tried to still make it look old. But then it was kind of like I guess it's like that Spider-Man movie, Into the Universe, where it was like comic, but then real life. So like, combining things, just being more creative. Like we don't have to, nothing's organic. Like, I mean, everything's organic. You don't have to just take something and keep it streamlined. Like you can throw
it can grow
in the mix. Yeah. So
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, something like 101 Dalmatians that had this another take on the story, or like from the perspective of Cruella, I thought that was really creative as well. And it gave me a lot of nostalgia though, like when they'll, I just wanted her to pull out the Dalmatian coat. It took her a while to get up to that, but I was just like,
yeah, I mean, and I was surprised because, like, in this cancel culture, Peter would be like, actually, we don't want to promote. So it's kind of weird, too, because, like, there's also these boundaries that you have to now stay within in the industry just because, I mean, I guess everyone's sensitive these days, or,
well, I mean, like you said, things
taking
change.
so much more into consideration.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. I feel like that's a real thing. So, speaking about, the shift in Hollywood as far as storytelling and actually having stories that are more diverse or, attuned to today, I think that there's also a real big push in Hollywood to get people of color behind the scenes. Or I shouldn't say real big push. There is a push, to get more Black people into the fold. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you started in VFX?
Yeah, I think there's always definitely a lack of representation, I should say, behind the scenes or even in post-production. Like, I think every studio that I've worked at, I've been the only Black woman. I haven't even like from any level, producers, secretaries, nothing. Like and I've worked for places with 500 people and with just like 30 people. And it's like, okay, sometimes there are other like Black men. I mean, there are other minorities, Asian, Spanish, so, and actually like African. So there are some minorities, but as far as Black women in particular, like I'm always the only one. So, yeah, I mean, and I would not have even been where I was if it wasn't for, Shay and Taekwon. Like he was doing computer animation. I was tagging along to one of his panels at NYU, and I was introduced to visual effects. Like it was just something random that had happened, and I had popped up at this panel, and I was just like, oh wow, this is really cool. Like I think this might be something I enjoy, because I did not enjoy my initial career, which was graphic design. Like, I think I was living in New York. I was complaining every day of something at work happening. I was just complaining about it. And I'm like, is this how I'm going to live my life? Like, working in corporate America, like complaining every single day. Like, that's not good. Like, that much negative energy. No. So, yeah, so then I was happy to kind of switch into something else. And even though I am the only Black woman, I feel like as far as like a lot of the corporate pressures and everything, in visual effects, it's a little bit more laid back because everyone just wants you to get the work done. But also trying to weave your way in as the minority. Because I don't know if it's like a subconscious thing or what, but it's like if there are literally no Black women in your studio, and there haven't been for
Ever.
you were established,
Yeah.
then some like Black girl comes up like, hey, I'm a visual effects artist, and you're like, oh, like I just feel like there's just a little bit of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just, I feel like even if it's not like at the forefront, like, oh well, we don't want to hire you, like it's just the hesitation because there has not been that representation. So I think that's probably a big thing when it comes to more inclusion anyway. Like people might be more hesitant. It's just like out of habit, people might be more hesitant because that's not the norm, and trying to break that pattern or that habit is always a little hard. So um yeah, I mean it was a long journey for me, girl. It took me 7 years to even get to like where I am now, and it was like not easy. So
Yeah. I mean, and just speaking about that, did you actually take classes? Did you go back to school? How did you,
yeah.
once you kind of define that was something you wanted to do, how did you like get in there?
Okay, yeah, it was a whole process. First of all, I had to quit my main income full-time graphic design kind of career path job, and I went to Pratt. They had a computer animation certificate program. So, because actually, Taekwon, my friend who was at NYU, he was like, "Oh, a lot of kids were dropping out because you didn't need the actual degree. Like once they learned the skill, they were getting jobs, and they're like, well, why I'm gonna pay." What, 30, $40,000 to get a piece of paper when I already have the job. So he's like, yeah, I don't think you need to go back to school full time. Just go find a place to learn the program. So yeah, I went to Pratt. I did their certificate program. And actually, it was funny because what I do now, they didn't offer in their school. So visual effects is like this big umbrella of possibilities. Like there's probably 100 or so different career like positions that fit into that umbrella. So when you say, oh, I want to do visual effects, it's like, well, what part of visual effects do you want to do? And you kind of have to figure that out yourself because like I said, in school, they didn't even offer the program I use now, or they didn't even really teach what I do now. So it was only because of I had a friend in the actual industry who was able to expose me to more and kind of guide me like, okay, yeah, I think this is a little more interesting for me. And it was kind of like at that point when I went to Sony and I did a shadowing. I sat near an artist in each department, like computer animation, compositing, like producer. I sat with everyone and I just watched them work because I wanted to see like how what I was learning in school was being like used in the actual industry. So after I did that, I narrowed it down. Like, oh, I sat with this one compositor and she was like so particular, like she was zooming in and she was like, this color's not right. And I'm looking like, it looks right to me. But she's like, no, I got to fix it. And I was like, wow, like to pay that much attention to something like, and that I know it's like going to be in the movies on the big screen and no one's going to see that little tiny bit of detail, but still to put that effort in, like, it's kind of like you're creating a masterpiece. Like every artist is there and they're just like fine tuning it to exactly what they think looks really good. So yeah, once I sat with her, I was like, oh, okay, I want to be a compositor. And then I realized that Pratt didn't have compositing and they also didn't teach that program. So I went to I got an unpaid internship, which was hard because I was used to working full time. I wasn't just out of college. So yeah, I had to take an unpaid internship and I was literally there from like 10 to 3 every day. And yeah, like my friend owned a daycare in New York, and she used to refer me to people like as their kids got out of the daycare and they started going to regular school, like, oh, my friend can pick up your child. And I was just picking kids up from school. Like, I was working my internship in the day, and then when school let out, I was like, all right, I got to get off. I go pick these kids up because I needed some money. Like, and that was kind of like I had to find something like to do on the side. There was no other way for me to really learn the program without being able to. I did the nannying, and then my other friend, she did relocation for people from Europe to New York City, and I started cleaning their houses. So I cleaned for like a lot of European people, and then I was a nanny. So two of my friends who had kind of like those businesses were like, oh, our friend isn't, like, I know someone, she's in school, she just needs something extra. I mean, I really don't even know how I would have made it without those particular opportunities, because so it was kind of like everything just happened it seemed like it all just happened by chance.
Divine order. It wasn't by
Well, but right. So yeah, by divine order, because it was like everything just laid out perfectly between, Taekwon taking the program and being like, oh, come to this panel. Because if I would have never went, I would have never known.
Yeah.
And then like having people who are already established, because we were already past undergrad, and they kind of had their own little businesses where they could just be like, yeah, our friend, I know someone who's reliable. And then like, yeah, you need some money. Let's see if we can get some little side jobs, like I think the people I cleaned for, they were like, come whenever you can. Like they knew I was in school and I was doing internships, so they didn't care. And then like, picking up some kids from school, spending a couple hours doing that. So it was like perfect, and that was really what I needed, because, and it was crazy though, because now there's all this buzz about paid internships, especially in the visual effects industry. It's kind of funny because now there's so much content being produced, they can't find enough people. So companies are actually starting apprenticeship programs, which I personally would have loved, because you actually get paid. So
I was just going to ask you, what's your advice to somebody wanting to get started now? Yeah.
Well, now, I mean, even the apprenticeships, you have to know the program a little bit, which would have been fine because, like, I was in school. So, like, you take a class, you can literally take a class, try to put together some sort of reel. And then if you could get into one of these major, I think Warner Brothers had an apprenticeship. Several other, I think Disney is having a animation internship in the summer, but they're all offering now to pay, which is something they didn't do before, which kind of shows like they were basically just taking advantage, because now they can't find people and they're like, well, we need to pay and we need to train people. And that's like, well, that's what y'all should have been doing from the beginning, because it is TV. Like, are people just going to ever stop watching TV? Like, right. Y'all didn't care about that, right? But
right.
So it's good. It's a good move to the future. But yeah, but for me, I had to just rough it up and like figure it out. And I was in New York City, which is expensive. And I was trying to figure out, well, how I'm going to pay my rent and learn this program, and pay for classes, because I was actually paying for all my classes out of pocket. Like, so I was just saving up enough money for each class as the semesters came. And it was like, all right, I can take 2 classes this semester. I'll take 3, however many I could literally afford to take on top of my actual adult financial responsibilities. But it all paid off.
Yeah. And then I know with you personally, like you mentioned earlier, you have a daughter. So how do you think working in the industry or like searching for opportunities, how do you think that kind of shifted or changed when you had a family?
Well, yeah. So when I was actually starting, that's when I first got pregnant. So it's kind of like right at the beginning of my career. So I know it's a male dominated industry, and I think men just can move their families around. Like they'll be like, oh, I got a job in Canada, we need to move to Canada. And the wife will stay at home with the kids, or I think that's kind of how it goes. Yeah. And I do remember like Shay, like my friend was telling me, there was one lady who apparently had a kid, and she like left her child with her grandmother, and she was just all over the world, like without her child, because she couldn't,
take them with her. Yeah.
Her career, this was her livelihood, and she couldn't like just move around by herself as a single parent and take her child with her. So it's kind of like sad that it's like that was the either or. Like, oh, actually, just last year when we were in office in New York, one of my coworkers, a woman who was married, she told me she lived in what's that state? Washington, Seattle, Washington. And what's the other one? I can't think of it.
Oregon. Girl, you know I'm American. I don't know geography that good.
Something like it's somewhere over on the West Coast, basically.
Okay.
But it's a smaller. It's a small. They were doing those protests, Kenosha.
It must have been Oregon. It had
not
to be Oregon.
Was it where they had set up the camp?
Yeah, yeah, I think that was. They made like the designated area for Black lives.
Was that Oregon?
Seattle? Maybe
no, it wasn't Seattle. Anyway, she was from there, and she had to leave her family for like 7 months of her contract. Like she was like, "Oh, my kids are teenagers," and like, but then like she also still had a husband, and it was just like, well, I couldn't find any work there. So I'm in New York City for the 8 months of my and I'm like, wow, like I didn't even know, like it was kind of like a thing that women just had to do to be in this industry, especially as a compositor. And then I think even freelance, you're usually, getting booked per project. So you can't even really fully depend on like, okay, I'm going to try to find a full-time job, so I can have some stability for my family. Like, I think financially, the companies just find it easier to book as they get the projects, which makes sense. But
for them, yeah.
But I think that closes, like it creates this gap where you're not able to grow as an individual, like within your skill set, because you're kind of put in a box. Like, oh, we need a compositor here, sit here and composite. Like, it's not like, well, we also do all this other stuff. And when we have time, you can break into, it's not like that, So then you're then you get put in a box, and then you're in this like cycle of doing the same thing over and over. And how are you ever going to break that cycle? Like, but remote working has changed that, for a lot of people. And it also, personally, I feel like I've had more companies be open to me doing a lot of other stuff, just because, I'm home. They probably like, oh, well, if she doesn't figure it out, she might like figure it out a little bit, maybe after hours, but she wants to try something new. So we'll let her have that time to do it. So I do think that has changed it. But before the pandemic, I would say as a single mother, a lot difficult. I think I used to leave for work at 7. And I used to come home at 8. So I would be gone before Izzy got out of bed, and she would be back in bed by the time I got home. So it was kind of like I was losing out on a lot of time. But again, this was like the career that I had dreamed of. So how could I, what was I going to do? There was no flexibility for parents. And I think that's why a lot of men are there. And not a lot of women.
Yes. And you bring up a good point, because I think the pandemic kind of revealed that to everyone, right? That became a really big issue, was what do single mothers who work do?
Yeah, for every industry,
for every career. And I think women have probably suffered the bulk of job loss. I mean, not probably, they definitely have suffered the bulk of job loss, either choosing to leave their jobs, or, they are in industries or jobs that could not come back as widely as they were, like service industries. So, yeah, I definitely think that the pandemic showed all of us, because I don't have kids, the pandemic showed that to all of us. But, I'm wondering if you're thinking that there might be a solution in the future. Do you think like things are permanently shifting in regards to being a parent, or possibly like women working in the industry? Do you think they're making any permanent changes, or what do you think?
I think because a lot of people have refused to go back to work, because they realize like now I'm like, well, I don't know if I would want to go back to that. And I'm actually getting offers now for full-time positions, but they're requiring me to go into the office. And I'm like, well, that's going to take away all that time that I just got back. So it's like, I think the balance is just be okay with what I can do from home, And I think eventually though, because like as many job offers that I'm getting, or like the people reaching out to me like, oh, we need like this level of person, that all requires an office person, they're going to have to budge because no one's taking that anymore. Like no one's like, oh, I want to be a supervisor. So yeah, sure, I'll be a supervisor and I'll commute to the office and I'll go around on set at 4 or 5 o'clock. And like no one wants to do that. And it's like, yeah, I'm fine being a compositor right now. Like I can work from home because there's also value in your time, you know. The time I was spending commuting 4 hours a day, and then the cost of that commute, and then paying a nanny. Like there was a lot of incurred costs that it's like, okay, if I'm not getting like that supervisor pay, it's fine because I'm pretty much keeping that all that overhead that I had before without, having to pay it out because I can work from home. So
yeah, it costs money to go to work. And I think people forget about that as far as like freelancing. Freelancing is a job where it's really apparent how much it costs you to go to work,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not getting any stipends. Like a lot of companies offer their full-time employees like Metro cards or gas mileage stipends. Like you don't get any of those benefits as a freelancer. So
and how do you handle your benefits because you are a freelancer? Do you tend to pay for those things on your own, such as like healthcare or, being able to take time off? How do you manage as a freelancer?
Yeah. So I pay for my benefits out of pocket. So yeah, that is a cost in itself. But I think because I can charge more as a freelancer, that paying that is not really a large like cost for me, except when you get surprise bills in the mail, and you're like,
right. Or
so
your car
like I
breaks.
gotta figure that part out. But like I don't want no extra bills on top of what I'm paying. But I do pay my own like dental and health insurance, and then I also add I pay into a 401k. So actually, I could actually keep the 401k from my last full-time job, and I can put money right into that account. So, I mean, of course, it's not being matched anymore, but I still can have whatever portfolio they had set up without, having to change it. So I can pay into that myself. Yeah.
I mean, that's important because, like we were talking about when we first get out of college, that's not anything you think about. You definitely do not think about retirement or benefits or anything. You just want to like work. And, it took me years to realize that I even needed those things or that I wanted those things. And that's what kind of brought me into corporate, distribution, because as a freelancer, as a sole proprietor, I was literally making good cash, but I had no benefits, know, and at that point I had no credit either. So I was like, if you ain't got the money, bitch, you really ain't got the money. And that was the problem, like, so yeah, it's not something you think about. But again, I just want to, bring that up because people who are getting started need to, especially
and there are channels and ways to set that stuff up for yourself individually. Like I feel like, okay, if I didn't have that full-time job where had already set up a really good portfolio, I mean, now I'm just paying into that, which is great for me. But if I had to like figure that whole part out by myself, I feel like that would have been a little more complicated because it wouldn't just be as simple as like, okay, just gonna put this money here and then I got to figure out where it's actually gonna go. So like that part is a little more complicated. Finding a good benefit package is also complicated. There are ways to do all of the things you will need to do, but like you say, if you're just starting out and normally if you aren't even thinking about those things, and then now you're like, well, I should incorporate those things into my freelance career, then you have to really kind of do some research. And I mean, when I was trying to figure out my 401k thing, I think I had to call the people like Fidelity. I had to like get on the phone, and I was just like, well, how am I going to do this? Like there are ways to even put money into the account, so you got to set up stuff for that. So it was kind of like, it was good because there was someone to walk me through it, but I didn't know any part of doing that and I was just carrying something on. It wasn't even
Yeah.
like setting it up initially. So
Yeah, and it's like I have a job with a retirement now, and that was my intention. I was like, I need a job that offers me to get this started because I didn't know any way how else to get it started at the time. And since then, I've also had to deal with taxes, and that is a whole nother like, oh, I'm an adult. This is not
girl.
what I thought it was gonna be. So now I have a financial planner, and which I am also always recommending her because she's my auntie. But that really helped, and it really helped to kind of focus my goals about retirement and about how to pay out for things. And she says the same thing. She's like, it's great if your job offers it, but you really want to take you actually want to do it for yourself, because then it is kind of a set situation that you have control over. Even health insurance under a job, you lose your job, you lose your health insurance. They change the premiums, you got to pay more on the premium. So when it's yours, you actually get to, at least you're aware of what's happening and you're in control of what's happening. You can change your plan when you need to. So again, just things that we didn't think about when we were getting started, but now that we're, 10 years into a career, it's like, especially as a freelancer or your own business, is definitely something you want to, think about.
The lack of vacation time is bad because then we literally just feel like whenever I'm not working, I'm losing money, and I'm a freelancer. So it's not guaranteed that I will always have work. So you kind of want to work when you have the work versus, all right, well, I'll just see what happens in the future.
But you take time off, right? You take the summers off, or you take some time off in the summer.
Yeah. The goal for me, which is why I wanted to start back freelancing, especially as a parent, was to take the summers off. So I have summer break with my daughter and we can kind of do stuff together since the work itself is so demanding. I mean, sometimes it's a lot. It just gives you more control, but you have to then be very rigid. Like, okay, well, I don't want to work all the time. So then, like, when am I gonna work? When am I gonna take off? And then, how do I plan for the financial, gaps in pay between those times? So it does require you to really be like a little bit more responsible and like putting real thought into how you're spending and everything. So yeah, my goal is to take summers off. I just jumped back into freelance in 2019 from working full time for 4 years, and that was a lot. And that's how I knew I was like, I got to get back into free. Because with the corporate, like, oh, the vacation time, yeah, like approving your time off, and it's too many hoops to jump through, and it's still 2 weeks of time off, which is what most companies give. Some give 3. Like, you got to work there for 10 years to get like 4 weeks off.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why just not give everybody 4 weeks off? Like, what are y'all doing? But so yeah, it is good to have a little more control, but everything it's like a balance, you're always shifting something to make way for something else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, work-life balance, that's the key right there. Trying to figure out how to keep it fun, keep it engaging, but also keep it challenging, and keep it expansive so that you can keep growing and keep going into the next phase or whatever else you're looking forward to. Which brings me to my next question. What are you looking forward to? What are some of your goals, and what are the things you're working towards?
Well, actually, now since I can work from home, like I'm actually working for a company in LA, I work for a company in Chicago. So I have a little bit broader scope of possibilities as far as work. Actually, some company in Australia was like, "Oh, would you like to relocate?" And I'm like, "I would, but I can't with my child." Like, so it's just like, but at least I can do any that are locally,
I mean, New York is a big market. Yeah.
Yeah, New York itself is a big market too. So I think for now, like what I'm actually trying to do, because I mean, I think I do want to start going on set, which I know will require me to go back into the office. So probably not this year, but like in the coming times, I want to be able to move up to the supervisor role so I can start going on set, seeing how things are actually being filmed, see that side of the production, and then, eventually probably get into more of a director role. But I would say that's kind of like a 5-year plan. I
Yeah,
think it's hard
definitely.
to say you want to do so much when you do have a child, unless you're just going to sacrifice your time. from your family to go just do whatever you want career wise.
Right. And just forget about them.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to do that. And, I mean, I want to take it to kind of our last little segment too, just like the influence of film, now that you have been able to work in the industry, I know how it's changed your life, but, what do you think about the impact of film? I know we were talking earlier about, your daughter being able to watch movies or spending time with her watching films. What have you seen, just your perspective on film today and how it impacts people? Just what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think on one side where we were talking about, yeah, things are creative. So people are just broadening their imaginations. They're being able to just think outside of the box more because you're just seeing stuff that you didn't see before. I don't know if it's a recent thing, but I do think it might actually be in some of the movies too. I feel like all of this, there's always a villain, right? So that villain has to be portrayed a certain way. And so you're always having that. It's always like, oh, someone's being this horrible person, and then you have someone else is trying to combat them. And I see that all the way from kids shows all the way to adult shows, and that's fine. But if you really think about it, it's just like this violence and this like bully sort of mentality just being portrayed over and over from childhood to adulthood. And then like we're here in this world where they're like anti-bullies. And I think I read an article, some 11-year-old autistic girl just committed suicide from being
the Black girl. Yeah.
So it's just, if you really think about it from like what we're watching, it really is all the way through from childhood. Even I think Peppa Pig, like she be snapping at her friends sometimes, like, and it's like it's just like these little bits of stuff that kind of equate to like the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that makes for exciting film because you're like, oh, everybody want to see like the hero save the day. But it's like, do we always need the hero? Like, can it just be something like that we watch that's just nice to watch and we're not like, I don't know, because that's how I grew up. I grew up watching it too. But now I'm just thinking more about like the culture and everything we're experiencing. Like after the pandemic, like everyone was like flipping out at security guards.
Yeah.
It's like, where's all this built up anger and negativity coming from? And then you're like, wait, it's really in everything that we watch.
There it is. I really, you brought up like Cruella DeVille or the new Cruella. And, part of the storyline is that as a child, she was just like evil, right? Yeah. Like the lady that was her mom was always like, oh, try to be nice. And she was just like bad. Like she just like break stuff, just wreck stuff. Like, and I agree. I think obviously I think they're trying to mimic, or I think storytelling as a human art form mimics what's happening, right? Negative, positive are eternal energies. But I do agree that American media is really focused on a binary. You're either good or bad, and so it's always like the battle between good or bad. That's what they consider like conflict in a story.
Yeah.
But I agree that sometimes I feel like we're kind of like, especially in modern stories, we're really like hyping up the bad guy. Everything's about the bad. The story is about the bad perspective. Everything is from, I don't know when it happened. I don't know if that was our generation or what, but the shift, the story is no longer about the hero.
But it's crazy because sometimes I find myself rooting for the bad person. Like, like that show You, like he literally killed everybody. It's like, wait, what's going to happen next? It's like, he didn't die at the end. His wife, he killed his wife, but he still got to live on, and he was killing everyone. And we're just like, oh, can't wait for next season. And it's like, he's just killing everyone.
But it's making this thing in our mind where it's like, it's okay. It's not just fiction. It's playing out in real life. And again, back to that verdict, I was really appalled by so many people being like, yay, happy he got off, but he still killed 2 people. Now, if you really were like, okay, that was justice, he had the right to defend himself. That's Right. But to say, yay, good he got off is like, that's
Yeah.
really depraved. What kind of person, what kind
And
of
it was
people
weird
are
because
we?
I saw people just celebrating that he got off or saying, "Oh, self-defense, yay!" Like it wasn't like no sympathy for the actual families of the people that died.
Yeah.
None of that.
None of that.
And it's crazy
And
because like we had just got through this the missing girl, the girl who went missing, and everyone was just like there was so much sympathy and empathy for her and her family. Oh my God, is she gonna be found alive or dead? Like they cared about that one life, and then someone else blatantly just shooting somebody in the street, and it's like, oh, good, he didn't get in trouble for that.
yeah, yeah. And
Wait,
so I definitely, and and in fact, a lot of times, is a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but in the past, they have tried to blame like violent behavior on like video
yep,
games
video
and
games and
TV
movies, yeah,
shows. But I do think there is some influence. I don't know if I could go as that far to say that people just see something on TV and then they want to go out and
yeah.
do something, but it's subconscious.
The
Like it's
ideologies that
in.
are being, like I could say this for sure. Like before, I told you I had stopped letting Izzy watch YouTube.
Mhm.
But before I let her, like when the pandemic first hit and like we were just chilling, she watched a lot of YouTube. Like I in the car, on my phone, on her iPad, she would just be, and I didn't monitor what she was watching or anything. But then when we were home, stuck in the house together, she started lashing out. And
Mhm.
one time she threatened to get a knife on me. And I was like, what are you gonna do with the knife? Like this was just like she never thrown tantrums. She
Mhm.
never cried. She never gave me any sort of hard time. So this was, I was just like, what? I was very concerned. And I was
Mhm.
like, well, the only thing that it could be is from what she's watching
Mhm.
because that's the only change. She's
Mhm.
now watching YouTube
All day.
all the time.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, I mean, it was to the point where I had like, I was like, she might need a counselor. Like, I was looking for like, because it was just like, they're like these little kids are actually following through with stuff like this.
Mhm.
It's not just a
Mhm.
threat because again, they're seeing it and it's like portrayed as being okay.
Mhm.
Like, oh, her parent did this and this, like the show I told you watching Hansel and Gretel, like
Mhm.
how these kids are like, oh, how dare you treat us like this? You don't deserve to be our parents, and they're like ran away from home, basically. I mean, it's Hansel and Gretel,
Yeah, no, right. But they explained it like that. Yeah.
but they were mad at their parents, so they ran away. It wasn't just like, oh, once upon a time, there were two little kids in the forest. Like,
Right.
they gave a backstory, which was like, these kids, like, F my parents, I'm out of here. And I was like, okay. But yeah, so basically, I stopped. I was like, okay, you can no longer watch YouTube at all. Like, I canceled it. And honestly, her behavior went back to the normal.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
she literally hasn't lashed, and it was like at least a good 2 months. And
Mhm.
honestly, I feel like one, I wouldn't have noticed it if I was still going to work all day because
Mhm.
it took for us to be home and me to really see her behave. So I would have still had her watching that, and
Mhm.
the little interactions that we have like in the morning on the weekend, that might not have been enough time to see the changes in her behavior,
Mhm. Mhm.
because parents
Yeah.
are kind of like just giving their kids something to keep them entertained and then they're just like doing whatever. Like it's not, you're not spending this time. So a lot could be going on as your kids are growing up. I mean, we know a lot goes on even in adulthood. So
Mhm. Mhm.
like you deal with
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff
I
and
mean, and we didn't grow up with that much exposure to media. So for me, it
yeah.
was maybe I got to watch cartoons in the morning before.
That Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Like I
You
said,
had one TV in the house, all of you all
yeah.
had to share it. Like who got TV time right now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like I remember having to run into my parents' room after school if I wanted to watch something.
Mm-hmm.
When they finally made like a TV room where they put the TV in the girl, I thought I was balling. I was like, I could
Right.
run home and watch MTV or BET,
Exactly.
but that was it. And then it was like homework time, dinner time, bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
So we only really watched like 2 to 3 hours of
Yeah.
TV tops a day, if even that much, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I remember it was really like Friday. It was like Friday night.
Yeah, it wasn't even a thing. Like I
Yeah,
feel like I never really wanted to just sit around and watch TV. I always wanted
yeah,
to go outside and play with my friends.
yeah.
A few times, like I know when I was older, I probably watched more TV, but I feel like we used to sit around as a family and watch TV. So it kind of had to be something that everyone could watch
Couldn't watch.
too.
Yeah, us too.
Right.
Like I remember it was very like it was a big deal if I like fell asleep in my parents' bed while we were watching TV, and then I was like up watching whatever they were watching, you know? Like that made me feel like I was really an adult because I was watching like Law and Order with them or something, you know?
Right.
And it's funny you should mention that though too, because I definitely think that that's sort of the same thing with social media and maybe adults. You know, we got all these adults lashing out because they're like overexposed to just a dumping of information, whatever.
It takes time to actually process any information. I thought one thing, like I was talking about how they're starting to implement artificial intelligence to a lot of things, cars, obviously, robots they're building, but in the industry too. But I've been learning more about how they're basically programming the artificial intelligence. And literally all they do is just feed it images. That's part of the training. You're just feeding information, and then it starts to see the similarities. Like the machine can then start depicting stuff that way. But literally the training part is, so you're kind of like dumping all this information just to regular people. And yeah, they're processing it. You're seeing stuff. Yeah, it's funny. Like you're seeing so much stuff, but it's actually influencing you whether you want to admit it or not.
Or not. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think we are right now. I think we're living in a very heavy media landscape, and it's happened so fast that it's had an influence that we really haven't gauged yet. You know, we really haven't caught up to the technology to say, oh,
I mean, even like they say people are addicted to it.
Yeah.
Right? They can't put their phones down, or, you know, little kids are lashing out if they don't have these teenagers. Like I've experienced it, complete craziness. If you don't give them a phone, like they don't have a job, they're not paying no bill, but if they don't have a phone, they're gonna go crazy.
They're gonna go crazy. And young, very young too. And sometimes that's what I'm like, dang, like, because I could understand that they see it and they want to get the phone. But when they're like 3 and 4 and they can really get through and watch what they want to watch, I'm like, dang, the brain is amazing that they could get through that, but at the same time not be mentally formed enough to decipher what it is they're actually watching. What's real, what's not real, what's special effects, what's not special effects. The kids can't really tell that.
Honestly, I'm glad. I mean, when I'm working from home, I show Izzy, they do the VFX breakdown, because I think too, every time she'll be like, oh, I saw it on YouTube. I was like, look, everything that you see, which is crazy that people wouldn't really explain it, especially the little kids who are just watching whatever comes up. It's no channel or filter. It's whatever comes up next, or whatever they're just going off of the still image, like see, okay, I want to watch this, but no one's saying, listen, this is not all real. Whatever you happen to see on TV or YouTube does not mean that it happens in real life. So I show her VFX breakdowns. I'm like, oh, look, see how this was before? Look at how it is now. Like, this is what I do for work. I'm making this look like this, because I think she was also at a point where she was like, oh, I saw it on YouTube. And I'm like, look, nope.
It's not real. Yeah.
And that's a weird gap, that like, that's something, it's weird that no one's really teaching that to kids while they're just giving them this information. Like just giving them information and not saying, well, actually none of that you see means that it's the reality.
Well, we've talked about that. I think there needs to be a media curriculum for elementary school. And media technology, let's say, because the idea that they're not going to have computers from here on out.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to be using computers from here on out. They're going to be making films and media from here on out, because now, like we talk about, to some extent, anybody can be a filmmaker, right? With their cell phone, right? But knowing media etiquette, media literacy, knowing the differences, between things, knowing how to research, we have a generational gap right now. We have people who are educators who did not grow up with the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have kids who are in school who only grew up with the internet.
Yeah.
So there's a gap in the middle where the teachers are not informing the kids of what the environment they're currently in.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids cannot relate to what you want me to sit and read a book? You want me to read how many pages?
Girl.
So we have
that's literally the reality.
Yeah, we have and I can only imagine getting older, because at least with kids, little kids, you can kind of slide by. But them high school kids, they not going.
And that's the problem now.
Yeah.
And that's why I know a lot of teachers are quitting, because there is just the kids, they don't even, it's almost like now, no, they don't even understand the importance of education, just because now they have all these internet influencers.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like even she's like, I want to be a YouTuber. I'm like, okay, that requires work still. You got to make videos, you got to edit them, you got to upload them. Right. Like that's a whole process.
Right.
But again, also just thinking that that's just an easy thing that I could do.
Yeah.
Me myself, or you know,
because they see the end product, and maybe rightfully so, because I mean, I guess I didn't need to go to film school to just make videos on YouTube.
Yeah. Now,
but at the same time, having that knowledge base, and in our case, we actually learned with different technology altogether.
Right.
You know, so
like understanding the whole process,
the
like
whole
how everything is working, not just seeing the end. Like, yeah, I could take my iPhone out and shoot a video, add some filters, do some cuts, and put it right on there, and that's it. But then you don't know anything about anything else, any other part of it. And it's like, even the ability to know that in the future, but that actual knowledge and education is just more about contextually putting things together in your head and figuring out how to function in the world, like not just not just finish things immediately, you know?
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. I mean, you just said, you could just make a video, post it online, but the reality is that's 20 years worth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's actually lots of attempts and executions at filmmaking. Yeah. So we're living in a very warped media landscape. And like I said, I'm a firm believer in media education. Mm-hmm. And I think our current education system doesn't have space for that at all.
Like, I didn't even think about it just having a curriculum. I think when computers first came out, we used to have a computer lab class. And I remember doing like Oregon Trails, like that was our video game. And we would be excited to go in there and like just to get ahead of, oh, this is how you use a computer. Yeah. I don't even think now, like say 3-year-olds can just go do some stuff. So they're not even worried about actually teaching that. But the gap in between of how this came to be and why you're using it the way you are, that part is just missing for kids.
And it's a big hole right now, because like you're saying, it leads to bullying. It leads to, misogyny. It's leading to violence, because we got adults out here who don't know how to check the source of a post, don't know how to. I had somebody tell me, oh, such and such. And I said, oh, well, where did you see that? Oh, I don't know. I said, okay, well then I can't trust you, because that's not a source. I don't know is not a source.
I just saw it.
I just saw it. Yeah.
Even as an adult, seeing stuff and remembering everything you see is not real.
Yeah.
Everything video you watch on the internet is not based off of facts, but it's just like everyone's just assuming, unless there's some sort of comedy included in that it's just real.
It's
like,
real.
Like I could go on YouTube right now and literally just start preaching about a whole new religion and why I believe in it, and I would probably get some followers. And it wouldn't be based off of me doing any sort of research, just me imagining something
and getting up there
saying it. Like, and then adult followers, like not just little kid, like legit. It's crazy.
We are living in those times right now. We are literally living in those times.
I guess that's basically how they had those cults back in the day.
That is,
they had an internet to kind of propel it, but literally it was just like some guy who just happened to gather some followers with flyers and like word of mouth, and then they'd all go settle somewhere. It's kind of like that times
100.
Infinity.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
It really is. Just take it at face value. Like
yes.
and you're like,
Well,
how did they fall for that? And
well, that's
like,
how I feel about these politicians. I'm like, y'all really still out here saying Trump won? You sound crazy as hell, y'all. Y'all.
Yeah, even
So,
politics need to change though, because
yeah,
we also know the reality too. Like,
yeah.
how many times can politicians say promise things and never deliver for us to always just be looking at their promises? Like, oh yeah, they I remember in Michigan, the car insurance was very expensive, so they everyone who's running for office would be like, we're gonna fix this car insurance. And that was like 4 years ago before I left, and it's still not fixed. And it's like every new person, it's like, what are we doing here? But
What are we doing here?
I don't know what the answers are, what the solutions are, but obviously things need to change a little bit.
Look, and on that note, let's wrap it, because that's definitely where it is right now. Everything you see ain't real, and we need to work on that. We need to fix it.
Right.
Right. Thank you so much for coming today, Shonda. I mean, I know you're not on IG, but just if people are interested in reaching out to you, how can they follow you? Or, if you have a website or anything, they can check out your work.
Yeah, my site is shondahunt.com. So that's that. I have a website.
That's what's up. You never
my
know.
actual name. Yeah.
Somebody might need a VFX specialist out there. They might be looking for you. You never know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I love you. It's been great chatting with you. Thanks for being my co-host today. And I'll talk to you soon, boo.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.